Fallen man cannot be trusted with unlimited power in government. This is why government must be limited. The Bible says, "Thou hast spoken and done evil things as thou couldst." Jeremiah chapter 3, verse 5. Welcome to the Monty Collier Report. I'm Monty Collier. The Monty Collier Report comes to you out of Northeast Tennessee. If you would like to have a free copy of my theological journal, then contact me at the email address that you see at the beginning or at the end of this video, and I will send one out to you free of charge. The Puritan Samuel Adams would be the first political leader in the American English-speaking colonies to call for a Continental Congress and a Bill of Rights. This is extremely important, and it is not a coincidence that such ideas would flow from a thoroughly Calvinistic-minded individual. Mark Pulse writes the following, and I quote, "On September 27, 1773, Adams laid out his plan. As I have long contemplated the subject with fixed attention, I beg leave to offer a proposal to my countrymen, namely, that a Congress of American States be assembled as soon as possible, draw up a Bill of Rights, and publish it to the world." With these words, Samuel Adams became the first leader in America to call for the Continental Congress and nationhood. End quote. Samuel Adams, chapter 9, page 139. A limited government and a government by the people, of the people, and for the people had been Calvinist themes long before Samuel Adams came along. More than 100 years before Samuel Adams was operating politically in Boston, Massachusetts, Puritan minister John Cotton, 1584 to 1652, preached an important sermon titled Limitation of Government. John Cotton was the minister of the First Church of Boston. In that sermon, John Cotton preached the following, quote, "Let all the world learn to give mortal men no greater power than they are content they shall use, for use it they will. And unless they be better taught of God, they will use it ever and anon. What saith the Lord in Jeremiah chapter 3, verse 5? Thou hast spoken and done evil things as thou couldst. Set up the Pope as Lord and paramount over kings and princes, and they shall know that he hath power over them. He will take liberty to depose one, and set up another. Give him power to make laws, and he will approve and disprove as he list. What he approves is canonical, what he disproves is rejected. Give him that power, and he will so order it at length, he will make such a state of religion, that he that so lives and dies shall never be saved. And all this springs from the vast power that is given to him, and from the deep depravation of nature. It is therefore most wholesome for magistrates and officers in church and commonwealth never to affect more liberty and authority than will do them good, and the people good, for whatever transcendent power is given will certainly overrun those that give it. It is necessary, therefore, that all power that is on earth be limited, church power or other. So let there be due bounds set." End quote. Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God and Other Puritan Sermons, pages 3 through 4. John Cotton's famous Puritan sermon should be required reading in any class studying the history of the United States or political philosophy. It was exactly this kind of Calvinistic teaching that produced the mind of Samuel Adams and led to the American Revolution. Men following Samuel Adams were called radical. That it was Calvinistic-minded men who were determined to win our independence from Great Britain is all too evident from history. When a Samuel Adams critic, attending the Continental Congress in 1774, was Joseph Galloway, Mark Pulse reveals to us Galloway's thoughts on Adams and other radicals at that time. He writes, and I quote, "Pennsylvania delegate Joseph Galloway believed that Adams controlled not only the Congress but events back in Massachusetts. Galloway wrote the following criticism of Adams. The radicals consisted of persons whose design from the beginning of their opposition to the Stamp Act was to throw off all subordination and connection with Great Britain. The radicals were Congregational and Presbyterian Republicans." End quote. Samuel Adams, chapter 10, page 163. Eugene Case also discusses the role Presbyterians played in the American Revolution in his excellent article titled Survey of Southern Presbyterian History, Part 1. Case's article appears in the Protestant Reformed Theological Journal. Case writes the following, quote, "The involvement of Presbyterians in the American War for Independence may be judged somewhat by the fact that certain have referred to it as a Presbyterian rebellion. The only minister to sign the Declaration of Independence was Presbyterian John Witherspoon, and a year before the publication of that document, in and around Charlotte, North Carolina, the heavily Presbyterian population of the area anticipated the rest of the colonies by drawing up their Mecklenburg resolutions, looking forward to independence." End quote. The Protestant Reformed Theological Journal, Volume 42, Number 1, pages 54 through 55. Indeed, it can be near impossible to discuss the birth of this country without bringing up Calvinism or the men known to have taught it. A.J. Languth, University of Southern California, informs us of an interesting comparison made by patriot John Adams. Languth, in his book on the Revolutionary War, tells us how John Adams compared Samuel Adams to the great Protestant reformer John Calvin. Languth writes, and I quote, "Reflecting on the differences in the patriotic leaders, John Adams compared them to religious figures. Samuel Adams was like John Calvin, if Calvin could be imagined in a tavern. He was cool, abstemious, polished. James Otis was more like Martin Luther, rough, hasty, and loved good cheer." End quote. Patriots, the men who started the American Revolution, pages 120 through 121. Let me finish by reading an important quote from Richard Hofstadter's political philosophy book titled The American Political Tradition and the Men Who Made It. This book was first published in 1948. Hofstadter writes, and I quote, "Long ago Horace White observed that the Constitution of the United States is based upon the philosophy of Hobbes and the religion of Calvin. It assumes that the natural state of mankind is a state of war, and that the carnal mind is at enmity with God. The men who drew up the Constitution in Philadelphia during the summer of 1787 had a vivid Calvinistic sense of human evil and damnation, and believed with Hobbes that men are selfish and contentious." End quote. The American Political Tradition, Chapter 1, page 5. So in closing, we cannot possibly be historically accurate unless we first admit that Calvinism was a major influence, not only on Samuel Adams, who was the father of the American Revolution, but also on the men who would later produce the United States Constitution.